Dr. John Scheck.
Linda. I knew you as Linda Simpson. I would call you Linda.
That's just fine.
Old friend.
I'd like to begin asking you a question I'm asking everybody, which is, tell me about the religious and spiritual life of your childhood.
I was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which is a very heavily Lutheran community. And my mother was a very staunch Lutheran, and
Hang on for 1 second.
Sure.
Thanks, Deb. This happens.
Oh.
If you're gonna wear a tie clip, we might as well straighten the tie up. Okay, so you're gonna ask the next
Start
question
over.
again.
Okay. Tell me about your childhood.
Okay. And my mother, of course, had me baptized early on. I don't remember. It was the most important spiritual moment of my life, but I have no memories of that. I was baptized as a young child and incorporated into a large Lutheran congregation in Milwaukee. And my father died when I was 4, and my mother was widowed. I had no brothers or sisters. I was an only child and learned to be by myself and take care of myself. And it just so happened that my mother was also a close friend of the president of Milwaukee Concordia at that time. We called him the director. And so we went to a lot of events at Concordia College, Milwaukee. And it just, it sort of evolved that after I graduated from grade school, Wisconsin Synod Lutheran School, which was just across the street from where I lived, I went to Concordia. They called it Concordia College, but I was a freshman in high school. Spent 6 years there. And it was sort of like being on a treadmill, because once my class, it was all men, all boys, all headed toward the seminary. And so I just was part of the group that naturally got into the flow and stayed in the flow. And before I knew it, I was headed toward the seminary. So I'm coming on my religious background. I did a lot of church things, and my life centered around the church. And I had no aha moment, no great spiritual experience that I'd say, aha. I did not go to no. It was the traditional Catholic small c upbringing within the context and the community of the church, and it was just been on plain from childhood all the way I would say till my 84th year. So I cannot point to a time which many Christian groups almost insist or expect their members to point to when they say, at this moment I had a vision or a light shining and I was converted. And so I was just always part of the Lutheran community of Milwaukee, and then subsequently of all the other places that I ended up after I graduated from the seminary. Okay.
Did you ever rebel, or?
Did I ever rebel?
Yeah.
I don't ever think I rebelled against God. I don't think I ever rebelled against Lutheranism. I became increasingly rebellious, here I go, against the increasing legalism and lovelessness within the Missouri Synod.
Okay. So you are at your most rebellious right now.
I'm very rebellious right now.
Okay. Then
And
tell some of the story. Tell the story about coming to Concordia, and you can feel
Okay.
free to weave that into your rebelliousness now.
I was within 1 month of graduating from the seminary, still part of this process that would automatically. I had 60 classmates in Milwaukee, Concordia that went to the seminary. 60 classmates, only one didn't go to the seminary, and we thought he was an oddball because everybody went to the seminary. And so 4 years at the seminary, 1 year of vicarage in Fresno, California. It was 1 month of graduation, and the dean called me into the office and asked if I would consider, instead of going into a parish, if I would consider going to one of the prep schools and being a house father and an instructor, which is a new thing because I had never given that a thought in my whole life. it just so happened that year that the Missouri Synod was going away from putting vicars in the prep schools as house fathers and instructors and going to seminary graduates. So they needed about 6 or 7 of my classmates to go as more permanent kind of
Oh, I
people.
see.
And
Instead
they gave
of a one-year stint. Now,
it was supposed to be longer range because
Yeah.
most of the vicars went for 1 or at most sometimes
Okay.
2 years. It just so happened that the president of Concordia at this time, Dr. Thomas Coates, Tommy to many of us, and the pastor of Holy Cross Lutheran Church in Portland, Edward May, who was the chairman of the Board of Regents, they called it the Board of Control at that time, were good friends, and Tommy Coates wanted a house father and an instructor, and Pastor Edward May of Holy Cross wanted somebody who could take the former vicar, Walter Keller's place in directing a choir and being an assistant pastor. And it just so happened that Tommy also wanted to try to have a faculty only of clergy, or to have all of his faculty ordained clergymen. That's the way he leaned. And it just so happened that I was a musician, sort of, amateur, and that I was single. And Tommy wanted somebody who was single and didn't smoke
okay.
or drink or like girls too much. Well, I didn't smoke. That was as far as it went. But so anyway, the arrangement was made that I would come to Portland and be a house father, live in Centennial Hall, teach the social studies and history across the board, 4 years of high school and junior college, Western Civ. And then I would be ordained at Holy Cross Lutheran Church and serve Edward May as assistant pastor and choir director. So that's what happened, and so it was, and so it came to pass in 1955 that I went into a totally different world, as green as grass, and struggled for the next, I was 55, and struggled for the next 10 years to become competent for that which I was doing. It was like a guy who had done brain surgery for years and years, then finally decided to go to medical school. I was totally unprepared to teach when I came out here, having gone through a seminary program that stressed English, German, Latin, Greek, and Hebrew, and here I'm coming and teaching history, which I liked, but was never, had no qualifications to
So
do
you had
that.
not had a formal training. That was not your area of concentration.
No, not at all. I was a generic seminary graduate that was expected to go 4 years at the seminary, a year of vicarage, and then go out and take a call to wherever the call placement committee put us. And it just so happened, it came to pass that I was diverted. And I came here with the expectation that I'd spend 1 or 2 years here and then go into the parish ministry. But it was the nature of Concordia at that time, lovely people here, that I fell in love with the place and increasingly in love with what I was doing. The place and above all the people. And so 2 years went by, and 3, 4, and 5. And I took a year off and went to the University of Oregon, got a master's degree in American history. And I'm still teaching. By then I was just teaching in high school, and after a while in doing that, I decided I didn't really want to teach high school anymore. So I went back to graduate school and got a PhD in 1969 from the University of Oregon in American history.
Oh, so that's your PhD. It's
Yeah.
in American history.
In American history.
I just assumed it was education or
No,
yeah, okay.
it's in American history.
Wonderful. Okay.
Yeah. Should I keep going, or
Oh,
you have
yes.
another question?
No.
I'm just sort of stream of
No,
consciousness.
that's
One
good.
thing
That's
is
good.
leading to
So,
the other.
We're at least up to 1960, but you came back after you.
I came back after my master's degree. I was gone for a year. After I got my master's in '61, I came back. I promised Concordia. They gave me some support for that program, and I came back after a year, and I was here 4 more years, and teaching only in high school, teaching under Art Wallers, because in 1958 the high school and the junior college separated for accreditation purposes for the high school. So I taught only in high school, and with, I'm sorry, due respect to all high school teachers, after just teaching in high school before, I said, I don't want to do this anymore. Anyway, so I said, I really need to, what do they call it? Go to the next level. So I took 4 years off. I really took a year off. And Concordia grad, I had a sabbatical, and I was going to be gone 2 years. I was going to support my second year by myself, and the Lord blessed me in a miraculous way, because after my first year in my doctoral program, the university history faculty granted me a 3-year, full ride on all my tuition, books, and a monthly stipend that enabled me to support my wife and 2 children without having to do anything, which was really an incredible gift. And so I brought home my PhD on a day I'll never forget, because I walked into the house in Eugene, turned on the television, and the first man on the moon was just taking his first steps for mankind.
1969.
Yeah, 1969.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's the story of how I came, how I evolved, bad word to use in this context, but in Missouri Synod context. But anyway, I evolved, and then I became a full-time college faculty teacher when I came back, and ended up teaching American history, church history, history of the Christian church, New Testament. And in 1978, when the college became the university, went 4 years. Dr. Weber, Dr. Weber asked me to start a humanities program.
Yes, I
The
remember
infamous
that.
humanities program.
Yes.
So I went around the country interviewing. I went to St. Olaf and a bunch of Lutheran colleges with reputations, and interviewed people, and came back. And that year, Frank Gebhardt and Dick Hill and I started what became the humanities program.
And that, it did become a passion for you, didn't it?
Yeah,
The
very much
history-
so,
Because
very much
it
so.
sure was transferred to us students, that
Yeah.
you loved what you taught.
We loved what we did. I've always, even though I'm an American historian, I've always loved the broader context within which the history of the United States moves. And I've always been a much more a historian of ideas than I've been a historian of dates and battles and political facts. So I'm much more interested in a larger movement of history through the world of thought. And I ended up actually, at Concordia, we learned to teach things outside of our specialties or for preparation or competence. I ended up teaching philosophy here for half a dozen years, which fit in very well, because the history of philosophy was always a close kissing cousin to the history, the political history of the world, especially the Western world.
Then, can I ask you,
Yeah,
from
sure,
your
Linda.
point of view, you can pull the lens back a little further than maybe some of the other faculty even. What did being Christian mean to you when you first came here? How did that evolve over time, or by being immersed in history, American history, and that's going to, by its very nature, include the history of how the church was part of the culture, the Christian life. What changes have you seen? What have you seen unfold? Both as a faculty member, but just in your real actual life.
That's a big question.
Yeah.
And it's my favorite course that I taught at Concordia, that I taught alone. Humanities was always a group project. My favorite course from the time I started teaching it till the last 4 years when I taught, after I retired, I taught for 4 years as an adjunct. My favorite course was all Religion and American Life.
Yes, I took that course from you. We
I-
love that course.
I loved that course passionately, because I loved the interaction of religion in general, Christianity in particular, the church, interaction of church with culture, and how it interacts. And what can I say?
Yeah, what did you learn through that process
What did I
of
learn?
teaching it? What did you learn because of teaching it?
Thank you,
Yeah.
Linda. I've always learned far more teaching than I've done just sitting there and reading a book by myself. The interaction with students was always forced me to think things through. I learned that the relationship between Christianity slash the church in the United States is incredibly complicated and has changed significantly, and it's continuing to change significantly.
Upsides, downsides, dangers,
Well,
joys, struggles.
all the institutional churches, hardly that I know of, bar none, all the institutional churches are experiencing significant declines in membership. And that goes with a much larger change in the culture. I'm just finishing a book by George Packer called The Unwinding. George Packer is a writer for the New Yorker. And he's detailing how in the last 10 to 15 to 20 years, American culture has become less and less community oriented. Americans are becoming less eager to identify with institutions, much more individualistic. And that same larger cultural trend has also been involved in churches. People are not joining churches. And religion has taken on a much more individualistic cast than it has historically over the course of American history. All institutions are suffering. Loyalty to political parties is way down. Loyalties to what used to be a big part of American cultural scene, the lodges. Headline in our local Lincoln City paper a couple of weeks ago, where have all the elk gone? Where have all the elks gone? The Elks Lodge is collapsing. Lodges aren't recruiting. Every church that I go to as a guest preacher, my own church, is all seniors, virtually. Now, the churches that I go to, because I tend not to go to big box churches or churches with bands or programmatic style of worship, I tend to be still very much enamored with the traditional liturgical and Lutheran worship culture, hymnody, liturgy, so forth. So I understand that there's an upsurge of interest in affiliation with those kinds of churches.
Okay, we're going to take a break right now.
Flying off.
Fine, I think
No,
you
but-
should have told them the reason you came to Portland, because your mother thought it was far, far away, foreign ministry.
My mother thought it. Johnny,
So we're rolling, but go on.
Johnny, you didn't tell me you were interested in foreign missions. That's when I told her I was going to come to
Foreign
Portland.
missions.
Foreign missions. She didn't know where Oregon was. I mean, you have to understand the culture of Midwestern Missouri Synod Lutheranism before you can understand the ecclesiastical womb out of which I came.
Sure. Oh, that's fine.
And I've come a ton of ways moving to the left on virtually everything since I left the Midwest.
Okay, so then that's going to take us right back to what you were just talking about,
okay.
how the culture has changed so much. Can you speak wisdom into this? What advice would you give the next generation? Let's say there are students here at Concordia University who are someday looking at this and getting to hear you talk. What wisdom, what advice do you have about this culture in this changing time?
This is tough. I hate cliches, and I probably spewed out a few this morning myself. Again, one of the other features of modern American culture that you know just as well as I do is this incredible isolation that the younger generation, including little kids, have because they are so immersed in their technological toys. And this is part of the larger set of forces that is leading people away from becoming part of social groups. They're content by themselves. American individualism of a new kind run rampant. I would say, don't forsake, there's a biblical passage, don't forsake the assembling of yourselves together. Reminds me of a baccalaureate I gave here about 20 years or 30 years ago. A baccalaureate address to the graduates. It was entitled, Some Assembly Required. And my point then, I was just recalling that now, it's just coming to mind, just recalling that, so, you've been part of this little group, part of this class all this time, and now you're all going your own ways, and you're all going to do your own individual thing, but don't forsake the getting together, the loyalty to a group, the kind of groups that you had here, the kind of passion you had for this class and the groups, something like that. But anyway, I would say that to graduates today, don't get so immersed in your own professional career, your personal life, and your technological toys that you isolate yourself from groups of people, especially in the church, whatever kind of group that is. And I'm not campaigning for a return to 19th century Missouri Synod Lutheranism at all, but I'm talking about the body of Christ is the central collective in my life. To be part of the body of Christ. I was baptized into the body of Christ. I have been nurtured by word and sacrament in my life, first of all by my mother, and then by a series of pastors, by my colleagues here at Concordia. I cannot say enough about my colleagues here. You've been interviewing some of the other
Emeriti.
Dinosaurs, fossils. Anyway,
Revered, beloved.
the mutual nurturing that went on here. We were the Concordia family for 10, 15 years, okay? And that self-description as a Concordia family had to go because it was too inbred kind of thing. But we did have a family, and I and my family and certain other of the families, I'll mention them because they're so nurturing, especially the Wallers, Art and Carol, and Dick and Irene Reinisch. Those four took me as a bachelor under their wing when I came here, knowing nothing and being all alone out here in foreign missions. They took me under their wing, and Amos and Connie Schmidt. Big irony. Amos was pastor of St. Michael's Lutheran Church, and the irony is that I was a good friend of the whole family. Amos and Connie had me in their home a lot. I played for sing-alongs in their home, and unbeknownst to them, and God bless them, I love them dearly, the time would come when I'd marry one of their daughters. That lady right there. And the Mays, for whom I vicared, for whom I was assistant pastor, but Amos and Connie Schmidt, the Mays, and the faculty here, we were a family. And there were others too, but the Wallers and the Reinishes. Now, Hans Spaldholz was in the same boat that I was. He was a bachelor too when he came here. He needed as much nurturing as I did, and he got it too. And they took us lonely bachelors under our wing. And as Concordia expanded, it became a four-year college. The family thing just didn't fit anymore. But we were still the body of Christ.
Yeah. Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, oh, please.
Well, I know I can interrupt you anytime I want.
Yeah, you
But
sure can.
As you're talking, what is coming to mind are words of the Concordia song, living together, serving each other,
Hello.
striving always for harmony.
I think I've
And you
heard
have to
that.
hold that with the bird's eye at the end, for harmony. Yeah, would you tell me about that? Because what is in that song? We just sang it. I was in choir. We
Yeah.
sang it every concert, at the
Right,
end of every
right.
concert.
It's still being sung.
Yeah, and I didn't realize how much that song became internalized until you started talking, and now I can hear your voice in that song. Can you talk about the creation of that song and
Yeah, sure.
how it actually echoes and reinforces everything you're talking about community?
It does incorporate an awful lot of who I am, who I was.
Do you
And
still remember
what-
the text of the Concordia song?
Yeah, sure. Out of darkness into the light of God, we have been brought by Christ our Lord. Living together, serving each other, we work and play with one accord. Living together, serving each other, striving always for harmony. This is our motto, we of Concordia. The cross of Christ is light to me. Of course, that was based upon the Concordia's motto, which anteceded this, which is
Yes.
Christi crux est
As
mihi
he
lux. And that's the last line, the cross of Christ is light to me. I'll tell you how that came about. See, I'll have to tell you something else about me. I was a graduate of the seminary, and I'd done some pastoral work. I've never served the parish, but I've done some pastoral work. And I still do occasionally preach when I'm asked. And I've always had a passion for history, particularly the history of ideas and of thought. But I'll tell you what my real passion is. My really great passion is music. I was raised as my mother, single mother, working hard to bring me up, gave me piano lessons from age 5. And I wanted to be a concert pianist. And I did quite a bit of work in that direction. But yeah, I didn't have the ability or the drive or the discipline to do it. But when I came out here and was asked to direct a choir, well, I have to say this. And I don't want to brag, but I did use my piano in a lot of ways. I was a accompanist for the seminary choir. We went on tour, played in some wonderful places with the choir, and when I came out here, I was asked to be a director at Holy Cross, and I never directed a choir in my life.
At St. Michael's or Holy Cross?
Holy Cross.
Oh.
I was a member of Holy Cross. I was assistant pastor there from 1955 to 1955 to 65 till I left for my doctoral program.
And then when you came back, you were at St. Michael's? 'Cause
Then
you
I
were the choir director here.
then I joined St. Michael's, and I took over the choir because the previous choir director left, and
You can go back to talking about your passion now.
Yeah.
That's fine.
so I took up directing choir, learned by the seat of my pants, sort of like I learned teaching history. I learned choral conducting, and then Art Wallers asked me if I would be willing to start a boys' choir, or restart a boys' choir in the high school here. This boys' choir, and we went on the road touring, and I wanted a musical signature that introduced the choir to the congregation musically. So I wrote this little text, "Out of darkness into the light of light," based very much on the hymn that my New Testament professor at the seminary had written for a larger hymn called "Thy Strong Word Did Cleave the Darkness."
Yeah.
Same tune, Tony Botel,
Yes.
Ebenezer, same tune, and same basic idea that's in the Lutheran hymnal. Thy strong word did cleave the darkness. So that was the inspiration. I know, I can't claim originality for that, but I just did that and used the same Ebenezer tune to do it as a kind of an introduction of We of Concordia, the Cross of Christ. That sort of set the stage for our little concert in church basements and wherever else we held forth. So that's how it came to be. I never, in my wildest imaginations, wrote that because somebody asked me, would you write the school hymn that will last forever and ever and metamorphose?
No.
And so it was this very simple little thing.
Now, you're credited with George Weller, aren't you, with it? Or is this, do I have it misremembered?
Every college choir director after I left here, I stopped becoming music director, did anything here. Every music director, George Weller, Dale Fisk, Kurt, have all done their own arrangements of it.
Ah, so
And
you
so,
wrote
and
the
for,
words, though.
I wrote the words. Only thing I will claim is the text. I do
Okay.
not do it. And I borrowed the tune, Tony Botel or Ebenezer, and I wrote the words. And I've tried to explain that. One graduation program here had it, Concordia anthem, and then had Scheck, Weller, Fisk, somebody else there.
Oh, yeah.
And so I talked to Kurt. I said, Kurt, you please, don't credit me with too much here. The text is Tony Botel. The tune is Tony Botel. I only wrote the text, and
Yes, but it so marks what life was like that. Called by His Spirit into this fellowship,
Fellowship.
we work and play with one accord.
pray with one accord.
Pray.
Pray. I said
That's
play.
right. I'm
It's praying.
Well, I
Pray.
better go back and see what I was saying when I was in choir.
Yeah,
We work and pray with one accord.
Yeah, work and pray with one.
Yeah.
In many ways, the text better fit the school context of the 1950s and 60s in which I wrote it than it does now, because when I read the last edition of the Concordia, my mouth is dropping
Yeah.
open at the diversity,
Yeah.
at the incredible. Not only diversity, but the influence, the width and the breadth of Concordia today around here. It no longer, I don't think that the one accord bit fits what we actually do. It may be the ideal, but it was certainly it was the reality of the 50s and 60s. We did have a common sense, and but Heraclitus, the Greek philosopher, says, "Panta re," everything flows. You can't step into the same stream twice. I used to argue you can't step into the same stream once because,
Oh my gosh, you did say that. I remember
yeah,
that.
because in the act of stepping, the stream
You
has
did.
changed. Yeah.
I wrote down a couple of quotes. Since we're doing quotes now,
Yeah.
do you remember this one? No one gets into heaven by submitting a correct theological treatise to God. That is a direct quote.
Well, I'm.
Does it sound familiar?
It's not in the. Yeah, it's what I would have said. In fact,
Would you still say
I
that?
would still say it.
See, so you were a liberal way back then, because I wrote that down, and I
Yeah.
still remember. I'm sure it was in Religions in America Live when we were arguing and trying to convince some poor speaker that their
Yeah.
denomination was doomed. And I remember that
I
we
did?
address-
I
No,
did?
no, we
Oh.
students, we were a more conservative and combative lot as we come in because we know everything now.
Were you in the class when I brought in the Jewish rabbi and
Yes.
and Glenn Hawes, who was the Mormon educational director of Portland State? I tried to bring some authenticity to that thing.
Provocative people.
I wanted to bring in people who for me to represent somebody else's
Yes.
faith with any kind of clarity and conviction was stupid. So I tried to bring in people who
And
would.
Christian scientists, you
And
brought in
Christian
everybody.
scientists. I had a Christian science practitioner, and
And we had wonderful discussions.
we did. It was an open class, and I love that.
Yeah.
And there's nothing like dialogue, And I'll tell you
You were
something.
fearless. When I think about it, you were fearless because we talked about hard topics,
Yeah.
and those were hard
Yeah, it was
discussions
hard
we had,
thing.
and somehow you moderated that and never came to blows.
One of the questions I always tried to focus on was what really defines Christian, okay? Because Christian scientists say, we're Christian. The Mormons said we are Christian. And so I always tried to get back, I said, I'm not forcing a definition on you. But I'm saying from my perspective and the Lutheran perspective, it all hinges on the way of salvation, whether it is something we do, or ordinances we practice, or doctrinal treatises.
Yeah.
But,
Theological.
but it's whether it is in fact, as Luther would insist and did insist, by faith alone. However, I've moved where faith alone, 50 years ago, when faith alone was in fact doctrinal treatises, quite rightly understood and submitted, to Luther's better position, faith active in love, and I'm into the active in love part.
So your understanding of faith alone has shifted a little bit.
Yeah.
So the depth and meaning behind the words has gotten.
Yeah. Faith is not an intellectual thing. It is an active. It's the via activa. It's the active life, and I'm more and more, focused on. Not that I do it myself, and I'm a far cry from the ideal, but Jesus' words. I came into the world not to be served, but to serve. I come as a servant, and I think the church. The church's role as a servant. That was far from my seminary training. My seminary training was all about understanding the Greek and the Hebrew and everything else and the doctrines so that we would be doctrinally correct. And I'm so far removed from that now, with all due respect. And I don't want to get into
Politics.
Church politics here. But where were we?
Faith is love and action.
Love and action.
Okay.
Faith active in love.
Which is going to bring me to the next, another famous quote by one of my beloved professors.
Oh my goodness.
I want to make sure I don't give you answers to questions you're not asking. Do you remember that? You
That
1,000
oh
times.
yeah.
So I have to ask you, what questions are you asking these days? Not what answers do you have these days. What questions are you asking these days?
You want to know the really hard question I ask?
Oh, yes.
You and your viewers are not going to like this because I should have resolved this long ago. Okay, this is a setup piece for my question. I still ask the question, even though the question I ask when 300 Christian girls are kidnapped in Africa and disappear, where was God? When 6 kids operating a lemonade stand on a street corner yesterday in, I don't know where it was, to raise money for the poor in their church, are run over by a drunken driver and killed, where is God? And I think, it's the question of Job. It's the question that which brings me to my next question, my next answer, the way I live with it, the way I live with the question. Okay, I'm not in control. That is a fundamental Christian thesis that I try to live by. I'm not in control. I hand that over to God. I can't answer that. I don't answer any questions that begin with, well, I can't. Why did God? Why does God? Why did God send His Son into the world? That's a different kind of question. But why does God permit this and this thing to happen? Why do, the old Saw book, why do bad things happen to good people? That sort of thing. I still struggle with that. And I resolve it, I live with it, I turn the answer over to God. I'm not in charge of this universe or the church. But whenever I read, a tragedy in Nigeria or the street corner, it keeps popping up. It's not a question that I can, shove into the archive and just forget it. It keeps popping up, and I say, I'll know the answer someday. God's bigger design for the human experience, the experience of humans that He created, the bigger plan that I can't get my head around, and it's a problem. It's a head thing, really. I don't have the head for that. It's a head thing. But it keeps popping up. So
Was there ever a time that you doubted the existence of God, and or was there ever a time that you were so concretely sure that there is a loving God, that you knew it? Can you think of it?
When I was not sure that there was?
Yeah, or the complement of that, then you're absolutely crystal clear. You knew from the inside that God is real and God is a loving God. It can be Concordia story, it can be anything out of your whole life.
There are lots of times. One of my prayers every night, personal. I talk to God a lot, and one of my prayers over and over again is, Lord, I believe, help thou my unbelief. Okay. Yeah. And when I try to get my head around God, and I see, and I read National Geographic among other things, and I see the world is now exploding into billions and trillions of universes and so forth in space. And a former pastor of mine, whom I won't name, said, the earth is only 6,000 years old and you must believe this. I was ready to walk out of I left the church, but that church. But one of the most influential books I've ever read, and I've read lots of books, has been by J.B. Phillips, and I read it 60 years ago. It's called Your God is Too Small, and My God is Still Too Small, Too Much of the Time.
That book just happens to be laying on the table back there.
You're kidding. I didn't see it.
I picked it up and I was reading it because my mother had that book.
Oh,
And
man.
we gave all my mom's books away when she passed away, and it just happened to be sitting there, and Mom was waiting for you to come.
Some of the most influential books I've ever read on my personal life and my faith and the way I live and the way I fight my demons and my unbelief are books that I read 60 years ago that, you might say are simplistic. One of them is J.B. Phillips, Your God is Too Small. Another one is C.S. Lewis, A Case for Christianity.
You had us read that book.
Huh?
Yeah, that was part of one of your classes.
Yeah. And, they're not great theological tomes, 800 pages of footnotes, but they hit a point, make a point, and address, if not answer, the questions that I deal with. As a thinking person whose thinking gets in the way of my believing a lot of the time.
Say more.
Huh?
Say more. I would say that.
I tell you, I want to say something because I got derailed when I was going to say it.
Sorry.
I have had, it's your question. I have had aha moments. And I have had moments when I know that for sure that God exists in all his wonder and grace both. And they are all musical moments. When I sang the B minor Mass in the St. Matthew Passion as part of the Bach Choir in St. Louis with the St. Louis Symphony Orchestra, then the heavens opened. That's when the heavens opened for me. And one of the things I've done in my life, which has nothing to do with my professional training or so forth, was directing church choirs. I started, I told you, with zilch at Holy Cross, and then St. Michael's Choir for 22 years. And then when Nan and I got married in 1992, we joined Calvary Lutheran Church in Staten, and Joel Nickel, dear Joel, dear buddy and friend of mine, asked me if I'd start a choir there, and I did, directed choir there, and then went to St. John, directed St. Salem, directed choir there for 6 years, retired after 50 years of church choirs. In 2005, I said, this is it. 50 years of church choirs is enough. If you're going to know anything about church choirs, can have a lot of joys, but they can also be problematic in various ways. Anyway, I got down to St. Peter the Fisherman, and that is such a beautiful place. And there's some lovely people there, a lot of lovely people there, and a new pastor. And so I'm directing church choir now. And one of the things I love to do in an amateur way, but always fun, and it always lifts me up doing, is writing descants for some of the big joyful hymns. And when the choir sings them and the choir gets lifted up, I get lifted up. And so my highest spiritual moments are really musical, and it's part of it. It's been part of my endowment. My mother wanted to be an opera singer, and she became a widow. And then she worked in a war plant in Milwaukee during the war to support me during the 40s. But she loved to sing, and I think I had that. I have that gene somehow. Not necessarily great talent, but also a passion for the joy of singing, especially congregational singing. When a choir can be an inspiration and lift up the singing of the congregation, we should do a lot of that at St. Peter the Fisherman, and it's a lot of fun, So I'm glad I'm back at it. See, I'm way off the track again.
Not at all. Do you have anything that you wish that you had been asked? Any final thoughts? How you'd like to be remembered? How would you like to be remembered?
I'm not sure I've always been an upbeat person, always filled with joy. There was a time in my life that don't want to talk about. It was a time in my life in the 80s and early 90s. So I was very sad. In fact, some people I've heard indirectly people say, "Oh, how sad he looks." Well, there was reasons for that in my life. But most of my life has been joy-filled, and I would hope that I would, in what I ever have done and what I'm still doing and want to continue to do today, is to bring some joy into the lives of people. Knowledge, yes. I still encounter St. Peter the Fisherman all the time. I'm encountering students say, "Oh, we just loved your classes." Well, that's an ego trip, and I try to push that down. But I guess I did. I was helpful to some students at some times. But if I have brought joy to people through choir or teaching or preaching or whatever else I did, I'm happy. A piece that always keeps inspiring me is an old Lutheran Christmas chorale. It has a refrain: "Joy, O joy, beyond all gladness, Christ has done away with sadness. Hence all sorrow and repining, for the Sun of Grace is shining." It's a great old. So I think that the years that I have left, and my times are in His hands. But I want to make one comment here. Nothing has brought me greater joy in the last 22 years than my life with that lady over there. She has just filled my heart with joy, and my life with joy, and so I want to compliment and thank my dear wife Nan, former Nan Schmidt,
Thank you.
whom God put into my life. See, He is in control. Brought into my life again. When I first came here, we had. You may want to edit this out.
No, I think.
Nan says cut.
Yeah, we're done.
We're done?